Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. For 4 out of the 5 last years, we've had Star Wars movies coming out in December, and we kinda made it a tradition to review Star Wars comics during the holidays, in particular the comic adaptations of movies. And truth be told, I was kinda gearing up to review Rise of Skywalker's adaptation despite my 1-year cutoff date. I hated that movie, and I have 10 pages of notes already for it, defending things I liked, providing analysis of why it doesn't work and how a lot of the creative decisions were terrible ones, how I would have handled the ending of the sequel trilogy. No, I have not read the Trevorrow script. Did we ever get actual, real confirmation from him that that was the real script? I just have a hard time believing that the guy who wrote Book of Henry would have made a better Star Wars movie. Unfortunately, in case you haven't heard, the comic adaptation's been cancelled. It was kind of in limbo for a while as COVID started ravaging things, but a short while ago they confirmed that it was officially cancelled, though it might just get released straight to trade as opposed to individual issues. Kind of a surprising move that they cancelled it because, regardless of anyone's feelings about any of the sequel trilogy, the comic adaptations for Force Awakens and Last Jedi were decent moneymakers. I don't know, maybe a consolidation move to save money on printing it? But yeah, unless they announce that trade or someone Patreon sponsors a review of the movie, that review ain't gonna happen. And I got repeatedly asked, oh my god, are you just gonna cover Rise of Skywalker itself instead of a comic adaptation? No one even seemed to consider the possibility of me doing a review of Solo's comic adaptation, despite me reviewing all the other prequels this year. And therein lies the problem with Solo. It's not bad, it's just not memorable. Say what you will about any movie in any of the trilogies, you remember what happens in them. You remember the feelings of exultation. You remember the disappointment. You remember the dialogue you'd quote again endlessly. You remember the lines that made you wince that you'd equally quote again endlessly. I don't like the prequel trilogy, but they're incredibly fun to talk about, debate, have arguments with people in the comments about. Solo is a fun sci-fi heist movie with pretty good characters and moments, but it's also a movie that nobody wanted and nobody really knew what to do with after it was over. It's just there. It is not a bad movie. I actually really liked it and had fun watching it, especially watching it a second time with friends, but it is a movie that is completely unnecessary. The lion's share of character development, the most interesting and important part of Han Solo's story, is the original trilogy. We did not need a movie learning how he met Chewbacca and got the Millennium Falcon. For all the flack that The Force Awakens gets for it supposedly just being about pushing the nostalgia button, in my opinion, Solo deserves that more, because it's banking on you giving a crap about how Han Solo made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. And honestly, I doubt that the comic adaptation will fix what I felt was the major deficiency of the film, Han Solo himself. But that's something we could talk about during the review. Let's dig into Solo, a Star Wars Stories comic adaptation, and see if there's any way we can connect it to Christmas.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where Yuletide candles burn. Linkara's gonna give you all a present you've not earned. Not Mensch, you're not the brightest. Frank Miller, you're off the nice list. If you're a comic writer who misuses a license, your gift will be returned. Digging through the shelves for the kind of comic books that would turn Santa's elves into common crooks. He reads them and he weeps, while down the chimney creeps. Biljamas with a Marvel trade to watch him when he sleeps. Linkara, he built a snowman, now it has a hole. Linkara, 8 maids a milking and a young blood troll. Linkara, only one Dickens homage away from going chestnuts. Linkara, this Christmas comic sucks.
Reading from a trade and no cover analysis. We open not with an introductory crawl, but still intro text. Crime syndicates compete for resources, food, medicine, and hyperfuel, all currently fighting for commercial spots at the Super Bowl. On the shipbuilding planet of Corellia, the foul Lady Proxima forces runaways into a life of crime in exchange for shelter and protection. And yet she still pays a better hourly rate than most corporations. Why are Lady Proxima and Hyperfuel in all caps but not Corellia? On these mean streets, a young man fights for survival, but yearns to fly among the stars. Watch as this turns out to be a prequel to Aladdin's Flying Carpet. Don't look at me like that, you know they do it! We open on a bit that's not in the finished movie, namely because it's brief exposition we'd get later. But hey, we do see a Star Destroyer being constructed, and apparently they're just 3 parts that get glued together. I kid, but now I just want to see Star Trek's multi-vector assault mode, but like a Star Destroyer splitting into 3 ships. Anyway, Lady Proxima instructs the young Han Solo to do a handoff in an alley, and apparently she's located in the Den of the White Worms. Man, young Peter Capaldi looks weird. Later in the alley, a fight ensues. Han apparently didn't bring the full amount of coaxium that he was supposed to deliver, and the guy he was making the handoff to was supposed to be alone. So it erupts into a chase scene as Han steals a hover car.
I was promised flying cars.
The car had some gold dice on the windshield that he takes for luck. It seems to work, as it gets him away and back to the den, where he's pulled into the shadows by his girlfriend Qi'ra. Since he still has the coaxium he was supposed to hand off, the two plan to sell it to get off the planet. But they're soon found by Proxima's goons, who drag him away while Qi'ra pockets the coaxium. Han says that the goons kept the money and the coaxium, and that he barely made it out with his life. Honestly, not that far off. But she doesn't believe him. He steals a staff that one of the goons hit him with, but another points a gun at him. Qi'ra steps in to defend Han, with Proxima trying to get her to not side with him when her gang is the one who helped her. She tries to bargain and says that they'll earn back double what she lost in the deal, but the goon doesn't buy it and just gets ready to shoot them. To bluff, Han takes out what he claims is a thermal detonator.
That's a rock.
No, it isn't, Proxima.
Yes, it is, and you just made a clicking sound with your mouth.
Yeah, but the explosion sound I make will blow you away! Eh? Instead, he just throws the rock at a window above them, and apparently sunlight burns Proxima, which allows Han and Qi'ra to escape via the car Han stole. They have to abandon the car soon afterwards in the chase, which now includes a bit where they hide in a barrel full of space worms to throw off the scent of the goons' dogs. Probably a good cut, not really necessary to have in the movie. From there, they enter a spaceport and make their way to the checkpoint. They hope to get away from the Empire at the very least. Qi'ra points out that this is incredibly risky. We've got no protection. We could get snatched up by traffickers, sold to Crimson Dawn or the Hutt Cartel. Hey, don't worry, I hear that Jabba guy's a wonderful human being. Han assures her that's not going to happen, handing over the gold dice for luck. Okay, I didn't bring this up in the Last Jedi review, but the dice thing is weird. They're like a bit of background decoration in A New Hope, and then never appear again in the original trilogy. And for some reason, they decided that there's now, like, a bunch of importance and history to them? Like, I wouldn't have even known they existed until they were given such significance in Last Jedi. Are we gonna learn the shocking truth behind the Falcon's "How's my driving" bumper sticker next? They manage to bribe the guard with the coaxium, but as they pass through the checkpoint, Qi'ra is grabbed by Proxima's goons. The security gate closes and Han's on the other side. She tells him to run, but he swears he'll come back for her. Of course, he has no money, no supplies, and nowhere to go to actually accomplish something like that, so he sees a recruitment station for the Empire. Explore new worlds, learn valuable skills, bring order and unity to the galaxy, build enormous superweapons, wear completely worthless armor, obey the flagrant whims of weirdos in capes and robes. Weirder still is that in the movie, the recruitment hologram is actually playing what seems to be a variation on the Imperial theme, implying that the march is somewhat diegetic in the Star Wars universe. I mean, you open that door and suddenly Luke staring at the twin sunsets while his theme song plays is actually him being overly dramatic to his own MP3 player. Anyway, he signs up for the Imperial Navy and gives his name. Han. Han what? Who are your people? I don't have people. I'm alone. Han alone it is then. Oh, wait, no. Lone Star. No, of course he calls him Han Solo. Some take umbrage with his name coming from some random Imperial, and I kind of have to agree. It's just goofy. Did we need an explanation why his name is the word Solo? This is a universe with characters whose last names include Skywalker, Starkiller, and Fisto. What's weirder still is that later Han will point out that he knew his father, so why wouldn't he know his own surname? Anyway, he's off to the academy, and the comic takes an interesting turn here. So in the finished movie, the recruiter says, "We'll have you flying in no time," which cuts to him flying through the air as part of an infantry fight on the planet Qi'ra. This is already weird because he was explicitly not signing up for the infantry, but there is a deleted scene you can see on YouTube where we find out what happened. That Han broke formation during a fight with raiders, disobeying orders, and the fallout from this gets him reassigned to the infantry, and that's where we get the "we'll have you flying in no time" line. It's better executed there, but the comic handled things a little differently. It starts on the infantry stuff before briefly flashing back to not only the incident in the TIE fighter, but another incident where he stole a TIE fighter and modified its engines. That part's not as important as the bit where he broke formation, though. We actually get to see it and the court-martial afterwards, and I frankly like the comics version a little better. While the cutscene in the movie is still good, showing Han doing his wheeling and dealing pretty well even if he's mostly unsuccessful, the comic actually has dialogue that explains everything a little better. Sure, Han saved the lives of his teammates by breaking formation, but they point out that in doing so, he destroyed valuable Empire equipment, which they cared about more. It's a good reminder of the actual culture of fascism that the Empire has. Lives are less important than equipment to them. But at the same time, they've already invested time and money in training him, so send him to the infantry. On the planet Mimban. Wait, if they were actually on Mimban, then why did the caption say this was on Qi'ra? I know his court-martial was occurring there, but it's really weird to have the caption like that. But yeah, regardless of anything else, the scene should not have been deleted in my opinion. On Mimba, it's 3 years later and Han's superior officer gets blasted and some captain named Beckett soon takes command. Han overhears him talking to two others about the AT hauler they're here to get and even spots that one of the ones with him, named Rio, has additional arms and his face is hidden behind a mask. And while aliens in the Empire aren't unheard of, hi Thrawn, the Empire is usually a Homo sapiens only club. Later, he secretly goes up to them and asks to join up, even pointing out that Beckett's uniform is full of laser holes, meaning he probably stole it off of a dead guy. Well, either that or the Empire is installing a really weird new rank insignia system. He tries to sell himself on coming along, but they're reluctant to do so. He tries to blackmail them by saying he'll sell them out to the lieutenant in charge, but Beckett's not stupid, calling the lieutenant over first and claiming Han's a deserter that they've caught. The lieutenant decides to feed him to the beast, throwing Han down into some cage they have, where a very pissed off Chewbacca is located. Chewbacca starts to attack him, even try to drown him in the mud at the base of the cage, but then Han gets his attention by speaking a bit of Wookiee. "Me have plan of breakout! You and I freedom make by secret battle of pretend! Look! Big stick!" The stick they took out was a support beam where the stormtroopers watching over them were standing, so they fall into the pit, allowing Chewbacca and Han to escape. Han convinces Chewie that Beckett and his crew are friends waiting for him, so they have to get to them to escape. And indeed, Beckett is impressed when he spots Han and Chewie down on the ground. Rio encourages bringing them on, especially since a Wookiee will provide some extra muscle for the job. After a cutscene where Han points out the ways that the stolen ship can be tracked by the Empire, Han and Chewie formally introduce themselves to each other. Chewbacca? Alright, well, you're gonna need a nickname because I ain't saying that every time. I'm gonna call you 3PO. Yeah, I got a good feeling about that name. On the planet Vandor, Beckett and his partner, Val, explain the job. It's basically a space version of a train robbery, using their ship to steal a cargo container on said train. It's full of coaxium, and there are Viper droids that can act as security if a certain beam is tripped, but they're confident they've got all the angles covered. After a character development scene the night before the heist, we get to the job in question. The only important bit of information we learn is from Chewbacca, who apparently explains that the Wookiees have been enslaved by the Empire and that he's searching for his family or tribe. Well, at least we know that his wife, son, and father will eventually escape so that they can have the freedom to watch cooking shows, repair transmitters, and masturbate to Diane Carroll. This is the way. Beckett gives Han his iconic blaster, the answer to a question nobody was asking. Anyway, the next day the heist is on and things seem to be going well. But this is a heist movie, so things go wrong with the arrival of Enfys Nest, a group of pirates and marauders who intend to steal the coaxium now that Beckett's done the heavy lifting. The sequence is exciting and action-packed, and does not go well for our heroes. Rio gets killed, Val blows herself up to take out a bridge and the Viper droids, and they lose the coaxium, which explodes and takes out a mountain. Still, Enfys Nest doesn't get it either.
All in all, 100% successful trip.
Han made the call to ditch the coaxium since the two forces were struggling over it, and if they had continued to do so, they would have died. Unfortunately, they were hired for this job by the crime syndicate Crimson Dawn, and if they don't deliver on it, they'll be killed. Han suggests that they just run for it, but Beckett says that Crimson Dawn will hunt them down. Their only shot is to talk to Dryden Voss, the direct guy who hired them, and see if they can find a way to make it up to him. Beckett does try to be nice and say that Han and Chewie can leave since Voss only knows about him, but Han volunteers to go anyway. And this is where I start having issues with our title character. While Han in both the movie and the comics says it's worth the risk if they can still get the money, it comes across more like an attempt at taking responsibility and sticking his neck out for a friend. And that doesn't feel like Han Solo when we first meet him. Look, Han's not an utter bastard. After all, there's a reason why he came back and joined the attack on the Death Star, but the movie, needing him to not be a total asshole, has too many examples of him just being so nice and, well, unscoundrel-like. Have a conscience, sure, but even if you tried to argue, well, the events of this movie are what shape him into the more selfish figure in A New Hope, it still doesn't match up. His later actions especially don't make him come across as the guy who's in this exchange.
But they're gonna kill her!
Better her than me.
To tie this into the other prequel reviews I did, that's kind of the point I was trying to make about Anakin. The journey we saw him on does not feel like it ends with the person he is in Rogue One or A New Hope. It's the difference between the story of Anakin Skywalker's fall from grace versus the story of Darth Vader's beginnings. And thus it's the same with Han Solo. This is the story of a decent guy just trying to make his way in a harsh universe versus a thief with a heart of gold. Neither character is bad, but there's this disconnect between the two. Han Solo is the weakest part of his own movie because he doesn't feel like Han Solo. Anyway, apparently they were scheduled to meet up with Voss and his yacht on the planet, or maybe Beckett called him, I'm not sure, and they get picked up. Voss is apparently holding a party or something, and is in the middle of murdering the regional governor while this is happening. While Beckett goes off to get a drink, Han is greeted by Qi'ra. Unlike the movie, we get a montage of what happened to her after she was recaptured. Sold to some weird-looking dude, who in turn sold her to Voss, where she became a member of Crimson Dawn. I think it's better if we left this part out. It's better to have it implied versus actually shown. And of course, we get this little gem that was dropped later on in the movie. Learning Teräs Käsi will only get you so far, Qi'ra. You must master all the dark forces of the Jedi arena, whether it is on the battlefront as a Republic commando or seeking a racer's revenge in Super Bombad Racing. You may fight a Jedi outcast from the Jedi Academy or just any other apprentice of the Force that lives in the shadows of the Empire. Angry Birds Star Wars. Anywho, yeah, Voss trains her to be a badass fighter, and she even murders the guy who owned her before him. The two reunite, and Han expresses how everything he's been doing the last few years was to get back to Corellia to find her. It's soon revealed that she's Voss's top lieutenant as he enters, and is introduced to Han and Chewbacca. Privately, Voss berates Beckett for not anticipating that Enfys Nest would try to steal the coaxium, and he needs an excuse not to kill him. Beckett promises to get the coaxium, but this was really the best chance to get it. Refined coaxium is strictly controlled by the Empire and heavily guarded. Han suggests getting unrefined coaxium, which can only be found in one spot, the spice mines of Kessel. Voss is reluctant since it's controlled by the Pikes, who have a fragile alliance with Crimson Dawn, and they don't want to jeopardize it. Still, since Beckett doesn't have any allegiance to the Pikes, he and Han could get in, steal the coaxium, get it refined before it destabilizes and explodes, and then deliver it to Voss. Voss is impressed by Han's arrogance and eagerness, so decides to go through with it, but wants Qi'ra to come along to make sure it happens. If you don't want the Pikes to find out about your involvement, maybe don't bring along the woman with a Crimson Dawn tattoo on her arm. To get the coaxium to a refinery in time, they need a fast ship, which Qi'ra can help with. She knows a guy with the right kind of ship, a retired smuggler and proficient gambler, aka Lando Calrissian. While Alden Ehrenreich never really convinces me he was Han Solo in this movie, Donald Glover's Lando Calrissian is amazing, and I was sold that this was young Lando immediately. He oozes charisma and cool in everything he says and does, and it kinda makes me wish it was his movie instead. Qi'ra doesn't think he'll sign on for the job since he's retired, so Han suggests winning his ship in a game of cards, since that's how Lando originally won his ship. Han joins the game, and he's actually pretty damn good at playing cards, getting to the final bet. I'll see your 2,000, and I'll raise you however much this is.
Must be a peach of a hand.
Lando bets his ship in response, and it looks like Han won, but Lando cheats with a hidden card. This is another bit I'm kind of iffy about in regards to Han. Sure, he's a bit of a doofus at times in the original trilogy, but this movie keeps crapping on him to where it seems like Han never wins anything, never has any successful jobs or operations, and is screwed over all the time. Han is supposed to be a smooth talker full of BS, yet most of the time nobody believes him. Let's actually see Han developing the skills that would be so useful for the original trilogy that his enemies were sick of by the time Force Awakens came around.